Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we've got a case which is so big I can barely fit in the shop. This is the Thermaltake View 51 TG ARGB. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so this case is an absolute monster and it's definitely not going to be for everybody. This is a big case, don't get me wrong, it is huge, and probably on camera it doesn't really give off how big it actually is. It is so big, in fact, that they have classed it almost as a cube case rather than a tower case. It is a big boy, and measurement wise we're looking at 315 mils across. That's over a foot. We're looking at 525 millimeters deep. That's just over 20 inches. And height wise we're looking at 550 mils. Again, that is almost 22 inches. This thing is huge. So other than the physical size of this thing, what are the other key features? Well, some of the key features, we've got 3 lots of tempered glass. On this particular version, this is the black version, there is also a white version as well. The black version comes with the smoke tinted glass, the white version comes with completely clear glass. So if that's something that you're interested in, click on the links below and you can see more options. And when you do click on those links, you'll probably notice the price of this case. Now, at the moment in the UK, the cheapest I could find was around about the £170 mark, which is quite an expensive case, and there are quite a few other options available on the market. So what makes this one stand out? Well, first of all, other than the tempered glass, we've got pre-installed fans which are addressable RGB. So in the front, we've got two 200mm fans, and in the rear, we've got a single 120mm fan. All 3 of the fans are addressable RGB and compatible with 5V addressable RGB systems from the likes of ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, etc. They are controlled from a hub which is included also. Unfortunately, the hub is a little bit limited and isn't one of the Thermaltake kind of standalone hubs. It is a specific custom hub which has been designed specifically for this case. So upgradability and adding additional fans or additional RGB features to this could be a little bit tricky. The fans themselves are not actually PWM controlled, they are static speed fans. The front 2 fans are 500 RPMs and the rear 120 is 1000 RPM. Both of these are under the 30 decibel threshold, with the fronts coming in about 24 decibels and the rear one coming in about 27. For me personally, I think that statically controlled fans on a case of this particular price is a little bit off-putting, if I'm completely honest. Personally, for me, I would have liked to have seen the case come as a bare metal item without the fans, without the controller, so I can put in whatever fans and whatever RGB components I wish to. But for simplicity, if you just want to buy a case straight off the shelf with great cooling straight out of the box, then this is definitely worth a look. Talking of having a look, let's take the thing apart and see what it's actually like inside. The tempered glass panels on this are pretty much a work of art. They're full-size panels and they're held in place with a really easy to use lock at the front, which is easily done with just your fingers. You don't need a coin or any screws or anything. And this opens on a hinge, and the hinge you can remove quite easily. One of the downsides of there being a lot of glass is it's going to require a lot of cleaning. Just filming the B-roll segments of this, I am taking a look around the case itself. I did find myself having to get out the glass cleaner and cleaning it as I went. So with the glass out of the way, let's take a look at the insides. Now this is absolutely cavernous. There is so much room in here, it is ridiculous. And obviously because it is almost a foot wide, you've got that depth as well. So if you're adding extra things like water pumps or huge graphics cards, hardline tubing, custom soft tubing, whatever it is, you're not going to struggle for room in here. It will take ITX, micro ATX, ATX, but I think realistically ATX is going to be your sweet spot. Anything too small I think would look a little bit dwarfed, especially because of how big it physically is. All of the standoffs are already pre-installed for the ATX layout, but you can unscrew them and put them in the additional mounting places for micro ATX should you wish to. Plenty of room for motherboards and also lots and lots of room for wiring. There's punch outs and cutouts pretty much all over the back of it. Moving slightly down further to the PCI Express area, so we've got lots of expansion possibilities here and lots of flexibility. As you'd expect on a case of this kind of size and also price, you can change it from vertical to horizontal mounting for your graphics cards. There's all kinds of brackets included. This particular bracket here, if you want to remove that, you can do. So if you're planning on putting a slightly bigger radiator on this bottom section, you can. With the bracket in place, you are limited to slimline radiators on the bottom. because the fans will physically hit that. But if you're removing this and having your graphics card mounted in the traditional way, then you can use a much thicker radiator. If you're planning on rotating it 90 degrees and having your graphics card mounted in the vertical method, you will have to supply your own PCI Express extension. That isn't included in the packaging. Moving back to this bottom area, we've got some sleds in the bottom for mounting 2.5-inch drives, so whether that's mechanical rusty discs or whether it's SSDs, you can put those in there, and there is some adjustments so you can move them around a little bit. Obviously, if you're putting a radiator in there or fans, they will need to come out anyway. There is also this really nice mounting area for your pumps and for combo reservoirs, so that's all included straight out of the box, which is a nice thing to see. If you are planning on putting a reservoir or pump unit in this section here, you are going to be limited to graphics cards of around about 300mm long, but if you're not using this section for the reservoir, then you can go right up to 440mm of graphics card, which is absolutely huge. So in this front section where we've got the fans currently, it does come installed with the two 200mm fans. You can, of course, if you want to, you can remove those and replace them with 3 120s or 2 140mm fans if you choose to. I think personally, being that you've paid this much money for the case, you're probably going to leave those as they are. The front mounting section is actually removable, so if you do want to put a water pump in there, or you want to put in a radiator or some sort of custom fans, you can take it all out and do the work outside of the case and then put it all back in after. On the back wall section, which is slightly recessed, we've got these rubber grommets here for cable pass-throughs. Also, you've got a cutout at the top here, so if you want to put water cooling features through there, you can do, or just to gain access to wiring, that kind of thing. You can, on this back section as well, put either a distribution plate, 360mm radiator, 3 120mm fans, 2 140mm fans. You get the general idea. There's tons and tons of room there for cooling. Although this is one of the sort of newer designs that I find in cases these days, which for me doesn't make a great deal of sense, especially when you've got your intake fans on the front. Depending on how your setup is here, if for instance maybe you've got a radiator exhausting here, you're going to have your fresh cool air come straight in from these fans and then be pulled straight out of the case out through the back, which is, to me, seems like an odd decision. Ideally, you're going to have your fans pointing inwards, which generally tends to look a little bit ugly, but it's part of today's design strategy, so what can you do? So that pretty much covers most of the inside, so let's take a look at the rear I/O. So we've got a section here which is our area for mounting hard drives. Now this is very similar to like a hot swappable bay. Unfortunately, it isn't hot swappable. I think that would have been a really good inclusion on this kind of case, but you do have these removable bays which you can just slide out, and this one actually comes with your accessory pack, which we'll take a look at a little bit later. You can actually fit 2 drives in here, which actually, talking of drives, this is one of the things with this case which kind of surprises me a little bit. Because of how huge it actually is, you don't really get much room for drives. Really, 4 drives is your maximum, so 2 3.5-inch drives or 2 2.5-inch drives on here and 2 on the inner section. That is if you're not going to be putting fans or radiators in that bottom section. So unless you're going to be taking advantage of modern NVMe drives which are attached to the motherboard, you are a little bit limited on mechanical drive space if you need it. So for video editing systems, you may want to look elsewhere. Moving across, we've got the outlet for the 120mm ARGB fan. Moving down, we've got the PCI Express section. Again, all this on thumb screws on this top section, and the bottom section there's about 4 or 5 screws to remove. This whole bit comes out and you can flip it around 90 degrees for your horizontal or vertical mounting. Right at the very bottom here, we've got our section for power supply, and you can put in a power supply up to 200mm in length. So before I put this accessory pack back away, let's quickly go through what we get in here. So there's 2 cables in there, depending on which type of addressable RGB your motherboard has. There's 2 cables so you can use, and that hooks up to the controller, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Also, there's another bag with a ton of cable ties and additional mounting screws, some rubber dampeners, all those kinds of things, and a CMOS buzzer. There is also included inside a instruction manual, as you'd expect to see on a case like this. Now actually, while we're around this backside, I'll take the top panel off. Now the top panel comes off with 2 thumb screws, and then you can just slide it back, and the glass and the surround all come out as one complete piece. And as you can see, I've not long cleaned this, but I'm not sure if it's picking up on the camera, but there's already greasy prints on it already. Once you've got the top section out of the way, you can also then remove the fan bracket from the top, which again comes on removable thumb screws. The bracket on the top is removable, very much like the front one, and this is actually really good. They've actually put in markings for 12, 14 and 20, so depending on which size fans you're putting in, it's nice and easy to work out where the screws need to go. And again, this top section, you can put in a 360mm radiator, 280mm radiator, 240mm radiator, 120s, and all combinations of that. You can actually also fit in there 200mm fans. So if you wanted to have the same on the front and on the top, you could have 200mm on the front, 200mm on the top. So tons and tons of airflow. The options on this are pretty much endless. So now we're going to move around to the back of the case. Now, as you can see, it's got perforations in this front section. So this is where the distribution block or your radiators can be. And this section here is for where your hard drives will be, or SSDs, and also your power supply. So your power supply is going to get nice, fresh, filtered air straight from the back. As you can see, the back panel actually has two magnetic filters already pre-installed. So if you want to, for more airflow, you can just remove those entirely or just take them out for cleaning purposes. And that takes us into the back section. So now you can see quite clearly the drive mounting area. Again, this is removable, so you can take it out altogether if you wanted to. Whether you'd want to, I don't know. It's probably going to be one of your few places you can put 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drives. We've also got lots of pass-throughs for here, cable management options, and a ton of space here for additional cabling. So your power supply would end up here. There is actually in the basement a little support bracket, so you can rest your power supply on there to prevent noise and that kind of thing traveling through the rest of the case, which is a nice feature. And again, it's fully adjustable, so you can have it up here or right down the end here. Moving further down, again, you can see the rubber grommets, and also in this section, we've got the addressable RGB controller. And as you can see, currently it is fully populated apart from the cable to go to the motherboard. But as it stands, you really can't add any more fans to it, which is pretty unfortunate. So you've just spent an absolute ton of money on a really nice looking case, and you want to add some more fans, but unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to synchronize with unless you buy some splitters or some other means of doing it. If you did go and buy Thermaltake's own software and hardware controlled splitters or controllers, unfortunately there's no way of actually passing the information from those straight through, apart from possibly through your motherboard. But it all gets a little bit tricky. I would have really liked to have seen some kind of expandable, addressable RGB controller, and also with a PWM controller would have been fantastic. Anyway, moving on. So as you can see, this section here, this is where you can mount your distribution plates or whatever you need to do. There's plenty of room behind here, so if you wanted to, you can put a radiator and some fans in there. Again, it will be filtered from the back, so no issues there. Again, this whole section on cases these days does confuse the heck out of me, it really does. Because this is filtered, ideally you want those fans to be drawing air in, but again, because fans, when they're being drawn in, you'd normally have a radiator behind it, so it's going to look kind of ugly. And also, depending on how far back it goes, you may block some of the airflow from the 200mm fans in the front. So yeah, it's one of those designs I'd rather see cases become a lot more squat and maybe taller. I don't know, let me know in the comments what you think about that one. Now luckily for cable management, there's going to be loads and loads of options. There's tons of punch outs and lots of areas where you can route cables around. Again, this pretty much back section is going to be closed off, so you're not going to see what's going on much here. And luckily, Thermaltake have thought of the possibilities and actually given some really super long cables here. I could almost plug these into my other PC across the room. Just joking, I can't, but you get what I mean. These are really super long, and it's nice to see that they've actually made the HD audio one, which generally tends to be kind of tucked further away. They've made that one a lot longer, so that is excellent. Now, connectivity wise, you've got things like your power switch and reset button, hard drive LED, you've got your USB connection, you've also got USB Type 3, and also you've got your Type C header as well. So we'll see that when we go around to the front of the case again. And what else have we got? So yeah, and also we've got the HD audio, like I said. So yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but again, loads and loads of cable length, so you can make a real nice tidy job of it. The addressable RGB controller, in case you're wondering, is fortunately powered by SATA, so we don't have to have any Molex cables in here, which is another win. One side note, if you don't have a addressable RGB header on your motherboard and you don't have any control, which, to be honest with you, if you're spending this much money on a case, it's likely your motherboard is going to have pretty much all the bells and whistles possible. But for some reason, if you don't have that, or you choose not to use RGB software, the reset button is actually wired up to the addressable RGB controller, so you can use that to take control of your lighting. Now what I'm going to go ahead now is I'm going to grab a power supply, I'm going to put it inside there and connect it with the fans so you can see what they actually look like. Now actually I've thought better of it. Better to show you the rest of the case first. I'm going to flip it around so you can see the basement, all that kind of stuff, before I put a power supply in, so we'll do that last. Moving around back to the front, so we've got our I/O section, so we've got some really cool I/O here. Again, this is a pretty expensive case, so you would expect some decent I/O, and yeah, they haven't failed on that at all. So we've got a USB Type-C, which is great to see. We've got two USB 3.0s, two USB 2.0s, we've got a headphone jack, we've got a microphone jack, which again is really nice to see. I don't like these new combined ones. I'd much prefer to see two separate jacks. Not everybody wants to use a combination headset, so maybe you want to use a microphone, a dedicated microphone, but you still want to use your speakers or whatever. Total flexibility with that kind of jack setup. Underneath that, we've got the LED light for your hard drive activity, and underneath you've got your reset button, which is a dual purpose button as we discussed, which controls your lighting. So a couple of taps on that and you can cycle through the lighting. In this top section here, there's a really nicely angled power button, with a nice little click to it, and actually is in a pretty decent place. It's very unlikely you're going to accidentally knock it. It's not on this front panel, so if you're accidentally plugging in a drive, you're not going to press the power button by mistake. So yeah, that's quite a nice design aesthetic. So onto the front panel. So the front panel moves off really easy. Once you've got the top removed, all you need to do is just pull the top up and you can take this off. Now, so for some of you probably looking at this thinking, well, it's all glass, it can't have very good airflow. Now, luckily there is a pretty big gap all the way along on both sides, so bringing air in isn't going to be a problem. So taking a closer look at the fans, as I said before, these are addressable RGB fans, 200mm, and they're Thermaltake standard ones. They do have their own proprietary connector, which goes to the addressable RGB controller on the back, which is a little bit of a shame, but you can, like I say, if you want to, just remove these entirely. I would really love for them to do a optional SKU of this particular case without the fans and without the controller. Maybe around about the sort of £100 mark. I think this would be a really good seller at that price point. Some people I think are probably going to want to change those fans out, so Thermaltake, if you're watching this, I think that's definitely going to be an option you should look at. Now again, you can, if you want to, there's thumb screws top and bottom on these fan mountings, so you can pull this whole section out, mount a radiator, mount different fans, all that kind of stuff, and have well, total access to the insides. If you're doing some sort of custom loop and one of your fittings isn't quite right on this side, you can just pull this out and you can get in there and fix it. So we better take a quick look at the bottom, and on the bottom we've got these large rubberized feet. Nice removable filter on here. I did find actually the filter is actually a pain in the ass to take out. I don't know why they've done it, but the actual lip on the end of the filter doesn't have kind of like a roll around, so when you try and grab it, it pushes against the mechanism which locks it into place, which makes it actually really fiddly to get out. Normally when you have this sort of thing, they come in, slide out pretty easily, but unfortunately for some reason on this one, it's just the way it's designed, it kind of is a little bit counterintuitive. It doesn't come out particularly easily, as possibly you've seen from some of the B-roll that's been flashing up. If not, this makes no sense to you at all. Moving further down, so we can see here, this is the underside of where the power supply adjustment is. So again, you've got your screws and your adjustment there. This bit here is actually for draining. So if you've got a water cooler in here, this is a nice, easily removable bung, so you can get into empty out of your loop. And I think that is pretty much it for the base. And just in case you haven't seen it from the B-roll, this is what the top section looks like. So again, we've got that massive mounting area for radiators, fans, all that kind of stuff. And you've got plenty of room here for other bits and pieces. You can actually move this across, up and down a little bit. There is a little bit of movement on there if you want to change the direction. But again, if you're putting radiators in there, water cooling, you've got nice, easy access to a lot of the features up here, which is pretty cool. Okay, so there you go. There it is in its glory. Not its full glory, because obviously we haven't done a build in this. Unfortunately, I don't really have the components to do this justice. I really don't. And I don't have any water cooling fittings that I think would set this off to give it the look it deserves. This really does require a high-end build, which is a little bit out of my price range, as to be honest with you is the case. Perfect for those that have got a lot of money they want to spend on a case and they really want to show it off, but for me, unfortunately, this is probably a little bit of a stretch too far for me personally. But please let me know in the comments, is around about the sort of £150 to £200 mark, is that the kind of price you'd be looking at paying for a case? I'm really interested to know, genuinely. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the RGB options. Now, obviously, most of you are going to probably be using your own RGB setup, so this is irrelevant, but the button does control the RGB, so I've got to press it. So this is the standard display. This is what you'd expect to see normally, so you're kind of unicorn puke. As I said before, the fans are running at 500 RPMs on the front, 1000 RPMs on the back, which for some, the noise floor might be a little bit too much for you to actually cope with. Personally, I would have liked to have seen PWM controls, as I said earlier, but unfortunately they've decided against it for some reason. I don't really get it. Anyway, RGB control. So you press the button once and you can change through, so you've got various modes. I think there's about 37 modes in total, although that does include the various colours. So if you take off about 16 or 17 modes, that does reduce it a little bit due to the colours. But as you can see, you've got the usual kind of colour fades, and you can go through and do like the flow. And actually the fans themselves do give off a really nice diffused light. And they're not overly noisy. There is a little bit of resonance coming from the case. This is on an IKEA desk, which does have a hollow section to it, so it does tend to reverberate a little bit more than a solid wooden desk would. So as you can see, we've got a few different options on there which you can cycle through. And you get the flashing. Basically it's the same colours all the way through, just a different variation, so it's flashing rather than being solid. And then you've got the static one, so you've got static rainbow puke, static red, yellow, green, blue, etc, etc. Classic white if you want to use the white, or just turn them off. And then you go back through to the original again. Now if you want to send the control of the RGB to your motherboard, all you do is press and hold this for 3 seconds, and then it will transfer. So it flashes a few times, and then that is in RGB mode for your motherboard or pass through. If you want to bring it back, just press and hold for 3 seconds again, and you get the flashing, and then it goes back to the unicorn puke, and then you can cycle through to your heart's content and find a colour that suits you. But again, I think most people are probably going to ditch the RGB controller, maybe even ditch the fans and put in their own custom fans. But again, let me know in the comments what you're going to do with yours if you plan on getting one. So there we go. I think that pretty much wraps up the Thermaltake View 51 TG ARGB. Again, I'm not entirely convinced on this one. I think personally I would have loved to have seen this as a bare metal chassis without the fans and controller at a more reduced price, maybe around the £100 to £130 mark. I think at that price it makes a lot more sense and puts it in direct competition with things like the Lian Li, which I guess is pretty much where Thermaltake are looking with this particular model. Anyway, I'm wittering on. Hopefully you've enjoyed the review. If you have, give the video a like. Don't forget, click on the subscribe button and chime icon and you'll be notified of future video releases. But that sums it up for me. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next view. Thanks for watching.